And hello, everybody, and welcome to this Houston County Political Forum brought to you by the Robins Regional Chamber. Today's forum is in a virtual format, but you will be hearing from candidates over the next 90 minutes for Houston County District Attorney, State Representative District 147, and State Senate District 20. I'm Frank Malloy, news anchor with 13 WMAZ, and it's only fitting that this comes on the very first day of early voting, which runs now through June 5th and leads up to Election Day on June 9th. I'm very pleased to have with us tonight April Bragg. She is the president and CEO of the Robins Regional Chamber, and she will now say a few words before we get started. April.
Thank you, Frank. Always a pleasure to have you with us. I would like to take a brief moment to thank our Chamber Board of Directors and specifically our Governmental Affairs Committee for their leadership and support of the Chamber's advocacy efforts. As a non-for-profit member organization, the Robins Regional Chamber is a bridge between businesses, military organizations, and residents together to bring them through effective programs that strengthen the Robins region's economic vitality, business success, job creation, and quality of life. As such, the Chamber is committed to advocating for business-friendly regulations and policies, an attractive business climate, fiscal integrity, healthy infrastructure, a talent-rich workforce, innovation, ethical business dealings, inclusivity, and transparency. We've shared a long history with 13 WMAZ hosting these candidate forums, and Frank, it is always a pleasure to have you. You've been at every single one, and so we just want to thank you for your support, and we're very excited for you guys pivoting to this virtual platform with us this year.
It's always my pleasure. Thanks very much, April. It's very important as we count down to Election Day, another very important election. Now, the format tonight, this is a political forum. It's not a debate. That means there will be no rebuttals. There will be opening statements. Then the candidates will each answer every question, and then we'll finish with closing statements. We're ready to get started right now. And our first race we'll be presenting is for Houston County District Attorney, where the candidates are, in alphabetical order, Arthur Creaky and George Hartwig. Welcome both, Mr. Hartwig and Mr. Creaky. Thanks very much for taking time to be with us. We appreciate that. And if you're ready to go, we are ready to go. We will start with opening statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes. We'll go in alphabetical order, which means, Mr. Creaky, you will start first.
Thank you for having me. I'd like to thank the Robins Regional Chamber for hosting this and WMAZ for broadcasting this on internet. My name is Arthur Creaky. I am a candidate for Houston County District Attorney. I am a lifelong resident of Houston County. I know Houston County is a great place to live, to raise your children, and I like to keep it that way. That is why I raise my children and they go to school here. There are several issues which Houston County faces in the upcoming district attorney's election. It's about the backlog, the cause of the backlog. There are in excess of 1,500 cases dating all the way back to 2001. Of particular concern are 127 cases still pending from 2017, approximately 370 cases still pending from 2018, and these are only indicted cases. There are issues concerning victims' assistance, the rights of victims in having an unreasonable delay in the prosecution of their cases, certainly a backlog of these cases where cases are pending for so long, and lack of communication with these victims is an issue. The third issue in talking to law enforcement is simply their lack of communication with the district attorney's office concerning cases, disposition of cases, preparation of cases. The list goes on and on. There has to be a realization that not every issue is resolved by email or a text. At some point, you have to go down to the office and talk to them face to face. They certainly deserve it. They deserve our support. They deserve to know what is going on with their cases. The last issue has to do with the management of the district attorney's office. It is clear that based on the backlog, based on the complaints from law enforcement, based on the complaints from victims about the lack of communication, that these issues need to be resolved.
All right, Mr. Creaky, thanks very much. Mr. Hartwig, you now have your opening statement. 2 minutes, please.
Good evening, Frank, and I want to thank you and April for moderating this event tonight. Thank you for hosting this forum. For the last 9.5 years, it's been my honor and privilege to serve as a district attorney of Houston County. Prior to that, I was in the DA's office for 9 years as an assistant DA, and prior to that was a law enforcement officer. I know full well what this community wants with regard to a district attorney's office. And district attorney's office tries cases, it goes after the most serious violent criminals that endanger our community. And we have done that. We have done that successfully. I'm not, my opponent gets his numbers from, but we'll get into that later. It has been my priority since taking office to go after not only the serious violent criminal, but also to go after and seek justice on old cold cases where people had been murdered in this county. People have committed rapes. People have committed some of the most heinous violent crimes that there are, and no one had ever been charged and prosecuted with those crimes. And my office, under my leadership, has gone back and has worked with law enforcement to not only review and revive those old cases, but to prosecute and prosecute successfully those old cases. And we have prosecuted cases from the 80s, the 90s, cases that had not been charged or prosecuted before I took office. We communicate with law enforcement. We communicate with victims. We do a good job keeping this community safe. That is my priority. That is my goal. And that is what I have done as district attorney.
Mr. Hartwig, thanks very much. We will now go to the question and answer portion of the forum. April Bragg will be asking the questions. Again, both candidates will get a chance to respond. First question, first response will go to Mr. Hartwig.
Role of the district attorney in the criminal justice system.
Well, the two main things that I just alluded to in my opening remarks are, one, seeking justice for victims, seeking a fair and appropriate amount of justice in each and every case. And then secondly, keeping our community safe. We decide which cases to prosecute, which cases to give priority to. And again, as your district attorney, my priority has been on the serious violent criminals, the folks that rob convenience stores, the folks that shoot other people, the folks that commit murder, the folks that commit rape. And we have prioritized those cases, and we have done a good job prosecuting those cases. Under my leadership as district attorney, we have gotten 53 total life sentences in the last 9.5 years. 22 of those life sentences have been life without the possibility of parole. That is just in Houston County. That shows the commitment we have to prosecuting and putting away violent criminals.
All right, same question. Mr. Creek, you now have 1 minute to respond, please.
Thank you. The role of the district attorney, like all prosecutors, as defined by the Supreme Court of Georgia, is to seek justice. It does not mean you go out of your way to persecute someone. The priority is not only just to seek it in cases of violent offenses, and you seek, obviously you always seek the safety of the community, but also you have to go to look at the thefts that are occurring, the burglaries that are occurring. I can think of nothing worse than an individual short of being murdered where somebody goes into their house and steals away their safety and security, and that those cases need to be prosecuted more. The thefts, that's why you had people writing into local newspapers about Mr. Hartwig not caring about what's happening to their cases and what's not happening as far as prosecution in their cases.
All right, second question. April will give the question. Mr. Creaky, you will go first this time. 1 minute to answer, please.
What do you think are the biggest obstacles in justice for our county?
I think the biggest obstacles right now in prosecuting the cases and in getting justice to the people who want it, deserve it, and need it is just the lack of prosecution in the cases that are going on. There is no reason why a case should sit for 2-3 years in the district attorney's office waiting to be indicted or waiting for someone to do something to pick up the phone and call them. As I indicated, there are at least 127 cases that were indicted in 2017. That does not mean that the cases are from 2017. Most of these cases have 4-year statute of limitations. So a case indicted in 2017 can be as early or as old as 2013. That is certainly one of the biggest, or not necessarily, or probably the biggest obstacle in the prosecution of justice in this case, in this county.
Mr. Hartwig, 1 minute to respond to this question, please.
Well, one of the biggest obstacles to justice is us being able to get cases to trial. The case that the thing my opponent just referred to about somebody writing a letter to the editor was one of his supporters. That is a big theft case from a medical practice. That case has been pending for 3 years. It's been indicted, it's been arraigned, and it is ready for trial. We don't set trial calendars, the court does. And so that case may sit until the judge tells us it's ready to go to trial. We have no mechanism to move that case forward to trial. The court is responsible for that. The other problem we have is, and part of this is on our legislature, is that with criminal justice reform that's taken place over the last several years, penalties have been reduced to levels where it's very difficult to get people to come in and plead guilty to crimes like they used to. And so now a lot more people want trials, and we just can't get the case to do trial.
All right, we now move on to question number 3 from April Bragg. And Mr. Hartwig, you will respond first this time. 1 minute, please.
You mentioned criminal justice reform. As a DA, what role would you play in the area of criminal justice reform? Well,
I was actually appointed by Governor Nathan Deal to serve on the Council for Criminal Justice Reform, so I have firsthand knowledge of some of the things that took place in that area. And again, as I just alluded to, one of the problems is that when you take certain crimes, and I'll use drug cases as an example, and people can get caught with cocaine or methamphetamine, the penalty on that used to be 1 to 15 years. And so when you made a plea offer to somebody, and most of our cases are resolved by plea offers and guilty pleas, when you made a plea offer, there was some incentive for that person to come in and plead guilty because the crime carried a 15-year sentence. Well, our legislature reduced possession of those drugs to 3 years as a max for smaller amounts. Well, if the maximum person gets is 3 years, there's not a whole lot of incentive there to come in and plead guilty. You hold out for a trial, and again, it just adds to the number of cases that have to go to trial.
Thank you. Mr. Creaky, 1 minute to respond to the same question.
I find it interesting that my opponent said he was appointed by Governor Nathan Deal to be part of the criminal justice reform, and then he wants to turn around and complain about that very act of reform that he was part and parcel of. I think criminal justice reform is something that has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis, what it is that the priorities of our society is, what it is society as a whole wants to accomplish. Many people that I speak to, they talk about how the slowness of the criminal justice system. Some of them talk about the lack of resources available to prosecutors. But in this day and age, really, it's a question of what is the society we would like to see accomplished in regards to penalties for burglary, penalties for drug offenses, and everything else that'll go along this line.
All right, we now move on to our next question, question number 4 from April. Mr. Creaky, you will go first with your answer this time.
Mr. Creaky, what, if anything, can be done to speed up the justice process for victims while ensuring the rights of defendants are protected?
Well, it's not necessarily that there's a conflict between the two. Really, what needs to be done in this particular county is that as cases are coming in, as far as the warrants are concerned, we need to go back and do something that one of Mr. Hartwig's opponents used to do, and that is you have an experienced prosecutor look at the warrant. People need to talk to the victim about what it is they want to see about their case. It needs to be indicted for the most part within 90 days, obviously exceptions for cases that may be complicated and so forth. Once you get them indicted, then you start the arraignment, and then you start working and get them on the trial calendar. It's really just a question of prosecuting in a timely fashion. Every defendant has a right to a speedy trial. Every victim has a right to a case to be disposed of without unreasonable delay. These things aren't necessarily in conflict. But that is the general process.
All right, Mr. Hartwig, your chance now to answer that question. 1 minute for your response, please.
Well, the part of the problem here is again that the district attorney's office does not set the trial calendars. So I don't select 100 or 150 cases and tell the judge, these are the cases we want to try. The court picks the cases that go on the trial calendars. So if the court doesn't pick a case and put it on a trial calendar, there is no mechanism for us as prosecutors to move that case forward. Once we've done everything we can do on the case, which is to indict it, get the defendant arraigned, particularly if that defendant's out on bond, that case is going to sit until the court puts it on a calendar. Unlike the defendant, who has a right to file for a speedy trial, and they can file a motion and demand that, the state has no such comparable right. So I, as the prosecutor, cannot file a motion with the court and say, on behalf of my victim, I am demanding a speedy trial, judge, and get a case to trial quicker. I don't have that mechanism.
I thank you. We continue to move along here with our forum for Houston County District Attorney. Next question, April. Mr. Hartwig will answer first.
Thank you, Frank. In your opinion, what should be done to minimize pretrial incarceration rates?
Well, I can tell you that the pretrial incarceration rates are not all that high. The people that are generally incarcerated pretrial need to be incarcerated prior to their trial. When folks are in jail and they are not given a bond, or they're given a high bond and can't make it, generally as the charges they're in on are very serious. They pose a danger to our community. They have lengthy records and are risk to reoffend and commit new felony offenses. And so we don't keep a lot of people locked up pre-trial unless there's a good reason for it. I know particularly now with the COVID, there's very few people being locked up waiting for trials that don't really need to be in there. But the dangerous, violent criminals, they need to be locked up pre-trial, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that they stay that way.
All right, Mr. Creepy, same question, 1 minute for your response, please.
The last time I checked, there were approximately 326 people currently sitting in the Houston County Jail. The reality is when people come up and they have bonds, they have histories of 120, 130 pages long. Those individuals have multiple convictions. They don't really need to be released at all. And in fact, the people, as my opponent says, probably the only time we're going to agree on anything is people who are violent, have violent histories. They do not need to be released. And quite frankly, it's just a situation where every case is different. Every case that people look at, and you argue the bond situation.
All right, we move on now to our next question. Mr. Creaky, you will respond first this time. Again, where responses are 1 minute.
Transparency and staff morale are key factors in managing a successful workplace. How will you ensure high levels of both in the DA's office?
Well, I think transparency can be accomplished by something that used to be done, and that is publish the amount on the internet of how many cases are currently pending within the district attorney's office. Mr. Hartwig's predecessor used to do that all the time, and you could just simply look up and find out what is going on with the district attorney's office. There also was no issue about having people call up and getting a good response or talking to the prosecutor in that particular case. A return phone call goes a long, long way. As far as the morale within the office, it's about keeping communications open, keeping your door open with your individual prosecutors and staff. It is about making certain everyone is treated fairly and equitably in their office, and that there is no partisanship or unfairness in treating individuals.
Mr. Hartwig, you have 1 minute to respond to the question.
Well, when it comes to transparency, the district attorney's office is very closely covered by the local media, as you are aware. Indictments, every time we have grand jury, every other week, the indictments in cases that we indict are published in the House-Home Journal. Most trials that we cover are covered by Macon Telegraph, House-Home Journal, WMAZ. Our courtrooms are public, Anybody that wants to come down and see on any given day what we do in the district attorney's office, I invite them to come down. They're welcome to sit in court and see us do our jobs on a daily basis. When it comes to office morale, one of the biggest factors is that prosecutors are underpaid. I've had 2 assistant district attorneys leave our office recently. Both of them said they were leaving for higher paying positions. Our county paid prosecutors have not been given step or merit raises in about 10 years. And it's hard to keep quality people, and that does have a negative effect on morale.
All right, our next question will be a 2-part question, April, and Mr. Hartwig will respond first.
Thank you, Frank. Mr. Hartwig, how would you describe the relationship between the DA's office and law enforcement? If there is a need for improvement, why? And what will you do as district attorney to support a healthy relationship there?
Well, I think the relationship between the district attorney's office and law enforcement is very good. I can tell you what I have done as district attorney to build and strengthen the relationships with law enforcement. And one of those is there is lots of communication. This notion that there's no communication between my office and law enforcement is apparently a figment of my opponent's imagination. About every law enforcement officer in this county has my cell phone number. My cell phone rings virtually around the clock when we have major violent crimes in this county, which again is my priority. I routinely go to the crime scene. I get called in the morning, go out. We have with law enforcement all night long, around the clock, on violent, serious crimes that have taken place in this county. And I can give you examples of that. The Sam Poss murder in Perry a couple of years ago. I was called by Perry PD. I went out and I worked out all night long. I worked with Perry PD on that case. So law enforcement knows they can call me. I'm a former law enforcement officer. I do get those calls. I get them around the clock. And I think that's what you have to do, is be available. And when law enforcement calls, you can't pass the buck. You've got to get in the car and go out, no matter what time of the day or night it is. And I do that.
Because of the length of this question, you do have 2 minutes to respond, Mr. Creaky, just like Mr. Hartwig had 2 minutes to answer too. So,
Thank you. I would suggest that if someone wants to find out about what the relationship is between the district attorney's office and a law enforcement agency or particular officers, go talk to them. I prosecuted over 1,300 cases last year. My communication with the law enforcement agency is excellent. I talk to them over the phone, but more than that, and this is what their beef is that no one from the district attorney's office wants to attend to return their calls. It's not about calling up my opponent and saying, can you go to so-and-so area for crime? It's all about what's going on with the case. Why did you dismiss this case? They understand plea bargaining. They understand not every case is going to be prosecutable necessarily. They understand what is happening or what's going on. What the issue is that when it comes time to try a case, they can't get anyone to return their calls. That is a problem with the district attorney, not with individual prosecutors. It's about looking at the caseload and deciding what is happening. The best way to improve this relationship and to make it healthy is to take the time, not just my opponent, but the individual prosecutors, to talk to the officers. That's all they ask. When a case is dismissed, tell them what they did wrong. They want to know. If there's a way to improve a case or improve a prosecution, they want to know. It requires something more than an email. It requires something more than a text message. It requires contact. It means something more than when they go down or someone goes down to fill up their county car, the county gas, they come in and say, hey, how you doing? It means communication, plain and simple.
All right, we have now come to the closing statements portion of our political forum tonight. For closing statements, we'll go in reverse order of opening statements, which means, Mr. Hartwig, you will go first, and you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Well, again, it's been an honor and privilege to serve as the district attorney of this county. I've done my very best to prosecute crime and to have a good staff and to do what we keep this county safe, and I will continue to do that. I look forward to serving as the district attorney of this county for the next 4 years, and I ask you for your vote. I find it very interesting that My opponent seems to know an awful lot about the issues and the problems within the district attorney's office, even though he has never spent one single day in the DA's office prosecuting felony cases. He really has not talked 1 second about his qualifications, his experience, why he is even qualified to be the district attorney of this county. And the reason he won't talk about it is because he doesn't have the experience. He doesn't have the qualifications. He's never done the job. He frankly has no clue what the job entails. And I am the guy for the job, and I'm asking you to vote for me and keep me in office. Thank you.
We will finish up with closing statements. Mr. Krikke, 1 minute for your final remarks.
Thank you. I have been a prosecutor for over 20 years. I started prosecuting in 1998. I became the Chief Assistant Solicitor General in 1999. I prosecuted over 1,300 cases last year. I have dealt with cases involving child molestation, sexual battery, DUI, theft by shoplifting, theft by receiving. I have prosecuted law enforcement, doctors, lawyers, people of every stripe and every thought you can think of. If my opponent wants to talk about qualifications, what he wants to say is that these things that I prosecute bear no relations. Take the time. What's the difference between felony theft by shoplifting and felony or misdemeanor theft by shoplifting? A penny. Or some of these cases, it's just a question of the amount of money that's involved or the age that's involved. But the thing is, these questions and these problems that face the district attorney's office has nothing to do with experience.
All right, George Hartwig, Arthur Krikke, thank you very much. We appreciate you taking time tonight to be with us for this Houston County Political Forum, District Attorney's Race. April and I are going to now take a brief break, very brief, and then we're going to bring on the candidates for State Representative District 147. That would be the incumbent Heath Clark and the challenger Miranda Britt. So please continue staying with us.
We'll see you right.
Hello and welcome as we continue with our House and County Political Forum tonight. I'm Frank Malloy with 13 WMAZ, along with April Bragg, President of the Robins Regional Chamber. Robins Regional Chamber is the one presenting these candidate forums. As we get to know the candidates, early voting is already underway. Election Day is June 9th. We're now presenting the two candidates for House and County State Representative District 147. The incumbent is Heath Clark. The challenger is Miranda Britt. Miranda and Heath, thanks very much for taking time to be with us. We certainly appreciate it. The format is simple. There will be opening statements. You each will have 2 minutes for that. Then April will ask a series of questions. You both will respond to the questions, and then we'll finish up with 1 minute closing statements. So we will begin with our opening statements. We'll go in alphabetical order. That means Miranda, you will start. So Miranda Britt, opening statement, 2 minutes, please.
Thank you so much for hosting this forum, and thank you everybody that's watching safely at home. I am Miranda Britt, and I'm running for State Representative 147. I am a mother of 4 biological children. I also have custody of my cousin's son, which makes a total of 5 children. And then I recently was the manager of my family's small business. I am now currently in school working on my CMA. And I just want to take a few brief moments to address a recent flyer that was mailed out to all of the registered voters in the area. I just want to let everyone know that that flyer is false. I do believe in term limits, not only in Congress, but on every level of government. So I believe once you've reached 3 terms, we need someone new in office with new ideas. And thank you for everyone that has given me a call about it. I have answered every single message, every single phone call, because I believe we need to have an open communication with our representatives, and I will continue to take every single phone call, even once I am elected.
All right, opening statement. Heath Clark, you have 2 minutes.
All right. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you, Frank. Thank you, April, for both of your organizations and what you've done throughout this whole kind of saga that's been the last couple of months with the COVID-19. Both of your organizations have done a really good job about telling good stories, trying to keep people positive, bringing about real sense of community in our area. So I just want to thank y'all for that. My name is Heath Clark. I've served in the General Assembly. This is my just finished up, well, in the middle of my 6th session. Since we're still suspended, we're technically still in session right now. But I ran back in 2014 and was elected. We went door to door. We knocked on doors, nearly 5,000 houses, and asked people to support us, kind of sold our vision on what we wanted to do. And I, since getting elected, I've stood by that. The things that I asked the people when I asked them to vote for me originally, and what I have done in the legislature is exactly what I told them I would do. And I'm proud of that record. I'm proud of what we've done in Georgia. I've been the #1 state for business for 7 consecutive years. That means jobs. That means higher incomes, wages going up. We've fully funded education for the first time in the state's history for the last 2 years. We've given teachers pay raises. We have invested in trying to better people's lives. We have led the nation in criminal justice reform, and all these things we can hang our hat on and be proud about. And I'm asking for the continued support of the people of District 147 here in Houston County to continue to represent them and be their voice in Atlanta, and try to continue to improve the quality of life here in the state.
All right, thank you both. We will now begin the question and answer portion. April Bragg will ask the questions. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. First question, first response will go to Mr. Clark. April?
Mr. Clark, what do you think is the greatest challenge our state will face in the next couple of years, and how do you plan to address that challenge?
I think the obvious answer right now is just the aftermath of the coronavirus, and how we're going to come out on the other side and be stronger. What are we going to do to address? Because, the reality is we're looking at having to make some tough decisions in appropriations. We've already began those committee meetings virtually. Today we had one looking at different federal funding that's come down to the state, how that money has to be spent, if there's any flexibility with it, how much money. So that the next couple of years, and we just finished with Hurricane Michael. We had to have a special session last year to address some of that, some of those issues. And so with the Great Recession, Hurricane Michael, now coronavirus, how to properly appropriate the state's money to make sure that we can emerge on the other side of this economic disaster stronger, better, and in a better position to improve lives.
All right, same question. Ms. Britt, you have 1 minute to respond.
Kind of the same situation, definitely what's going on with COVID and how do we go about handling it afterwards. A big focus is going to be economics. I do know the governor wants to revise the budget. That does entail, and word is that the teachers won't be getting their raises this year. And I really hope that's not true, because our teachers are the forefront of our next generation. So on top of that, also with the COVID situation, I believe it's addressing the issues we have in our healthcare system. So we definitely need to focus on those, making sure our hospitals have what they need, and making sure our rural areas have hospitals and doctors that they can go to in cases of an emergency and with this COVID situation.
All right, second question. We'll get first response. And again, response 1 minute, please.
Ms. Britt, Georgia has received fairly equal amounts of criticism and praise for the state's response to COVID-19. How would you rate our state leadership's response to this unprecedented crisis?
Well, I will be honest, at first, when the governor was talking about reopening the state of Georgia, I was very worried about it because I listened to what President Trump said, and that was 14 days of decrease. When we decided to start opening up, we were only on day 7. But once our governor came out and explained why he decided to do it, and that he had already had a conversation with our president about it, I felt better. I do wish that our local officials and even our House representatives would have been a little bit more communicate with us on what's going on and why things are happening. And I also think it addresses situations that we have with asking hospitals certain questions as regards to race and age with COVID-19, and also what supplies they have.
All right, same question, Mr. Clark. You have 1 minute to respond.
It hasn't been easy. Nobody knows the future. I think Governor Kemp took some bold leadership when he looked at the data. He's tried to be data driven and not just emotionally driven on his policies here. When he did the shelter in place, he was criticized for not going far enough. And then when he lifted it, some of the same people were criticizing him for getting out too early. And so, when you look at it, it's a hard situation because people have spent 20, 30 years investing in a business and growing it, and that was being ripped away from them. And as a state representative, I was having phone calls from these business owners saying that their landlords are still charging them rent. What can I do? And I was trying to get them in touch with people to help them out. It's a hard situation, but I think Governor Kemp showed some bold leadership in getting our state out ahead and trying to open these businesses back up so that them and their employees could continue to earn their livelihoods.
All right, now move on to our third question from April. And Mr. Clark, you will respond first this time.
With the economic slowdown, how do you plan to keep taxes low, yet rebuild the emergency fund and keep a balanced budget?
I'm glad you brought up the emergency fund. We were in a different situation than most other states. We had about $3 billion in emergency funds accumulated over because of being fiscally responsible with the taxpayer money. In saying that, we used $100 million in this current year's budget. We made some adjustments in January and added that back in for the COVID response. But you know, it's going to come through being fiscally responsible. We have an emergency fund that we can use. A lot of states don't have that. One of the reasons why we've maintained a AAA bond rating is because we have a plethora of revenue streams. So when the economy gets going again, we have the revenue streams to come in to make sure that we can make ends meet and not have to raise taxes to do so. You know, I think studies have shown too that cutting taxes can raise revenues for states and, you know, bring jobs and investment into the state, which brings more tax revenue and a tax base. And so those are the kinds of things that we'll keep doing, find ways to grow the economy.
Same question about the economy. Ms. Britt, you have 1 minute to respond.
We definitely need to make sure we keep our rainy day fund and making sure we don't tap into it as much as we possibly can. So definitely re-looking at the budget now that we know what has gone on. I do understand that there will be hard cuts to make. But in the end, I think if we can open up our economy as fast as possible, we can start bringing in revenue and also partnering with the private industry to bring in more businesses here in Georgia, whether that's giving them tax cuts, tax credits. That's definitely something we need to look at, because if we're bringing more businesses here, more people get jobs, we can start getting more income tax money and bringing more people into the state who will then go out and buy products here, hopefully local Georgia products. So it'll help everyone out. But that is something that we'd have to look at.
All right, you're watching our House and County Political Forum, sponsored by Robbins Regional Chamber. Right now we have our candidates for State Representative District 147, Heath Clark and Miranda Britt. Our next question, question number 4, Ms. Britt, you will have the first response this time, 1 minute.
With 9 military installations across the state, what are your plans to support and enhance the capabilities of those installations?
I have been in talks with a couple of people in regards to cutting out the income tax rate for our active military members. That is something I'm looking at in regards to how other states are doing those. That would also keep Georgia residents that are active military instead of them becoming residents in other states. So that is something I am looking at. I will be more than happy to visit with those military bases and the people that are generals there and talking with them about what they need and how I can assist them. Right now, I do not have access to our military base because I am not military or dependent. And with the COVID situation, it has been hard to get in contact with them. But I think having meetings and discussing what they need instead of guessing what they need is the proper way to handle it.
All right, same question. 1 minute for you.
Well, this question hit real close to my heart. I am the chairman of the House Defense and Veterans Affairs Committee. When I got elected, one of the first things I worked on was forming a study committee within the House to go around to those 9 different military installations and talk to them and see things that, from their perspective, what can we do to improve the quality of lives of your servicemen and bring some more missions for the men and women into the state here. So among those, I have a bill that I'm currently working on it's the military spousal licensure bill. So if they, one of the problems that they have coming to this state is getting to work, their spouses getting to work. And I'm wanting to cut that red tape so their spouses, if they have a professional license when they move here, can get to work immediately and not have to go through red tape to earn an income here in our state. Time ran out. But.
Thank you. We're pleased to have April Bragg, president of the Robbins Regional Chamber, asking our questions tonight. April, this next question, first response goes to Mr. Clark.
Very good. Rural areas across the state face healthcare challenges due to limited access to hospitals. What are some ways we can enhance healthcare options for those living in rural areas of our state?
Great question. And this is a real problem, a real issue, and we've started to address that in several ways. We've created programs with Mercer University and their Columbus campus to incentivize doctors to go work in the rural areas of our state. We've worked on high-speed internet access, getting access to rural parts of to the internet to rural parts of the state, so that telehealth can be an option for them. We have created tax giving, like, programs where people can give. And this was Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan's plan, that there a tax credit for donations to hospitals in rural areas, so that money goes into those hospitals with no strings attached, and that they can use it to address the specific needs in those areas. We've also, looked at ways to incentivize the not only the doctors, but other ways with here in Houston County, there are some nurses that they travel to people's houses to provide care to people.
All right. Same question on healthcare. Ms. Britt, you have 1 minute to reply.
This situation is very personal to me, because if you look at it, there are about 64 rural counties that don't even have OBGYNs. And this also contributes to the maternal mortality rate, which is definitely big on my platform. A lot of these people don't have access to healthcare because of income. A lot of these people are farmers. So we definitely need to help out and take a look at our Medicaid and Medicare system. We also need to look at nonprofit hospitals versus profitable hospitals, and how we help out certain hospitals and give them tax cuts. I do like what Mr. Clark said about traveling nurses. Now, with that being said, we also need more nurses in the state. So if we focus on schooling that specifically focuses on the trade, we could produce more of those nurses. Ran out of time.
We'll continue with our question and answers. This next question, first response will go to Ms. Britt.
What is your opinion on casino gambling revenue as a potential future solution for some of the financial strain caused by COVID-19?
I actually had a conversation about this with another government official. I personally am not a gambler, but I do believe we need to start looking outside of the box to bring more revenue into the state. So I am not opposed to casinos and gambling as long as it's not taken advantage of, as long as we are able to monitor the amount of money going in and going out. That would keep people here locally gambling instead of going to Biloxi or out of state. So I do believe that's something that we can look into. I do believe there will be regulations to those just to make sure that they are handled properly.
All right, question on casino gambling. Mr. Clark, you have 1 minute for your response.
All right. So this one's tricky. On the surface, it sounds like casino gambling brings revenue to the state. But studies have shown that it's not necessarily a moneymaker for states. And that's something you've got to look at with this issue, that there's other areas that get affected. Where do they put the casino? Does it go into Atlanta, where does there need to be economic development in Atlanta? And some of those places around where that casino has been proposed, they're against it because it kills their businesses and the economic development that's already happened. There's tertiary issues surrounding casinos that we've tried to address in this state already. I think what you might see is an incremental step, because the issue here is not gambling. Gambling's legal in Georgia. It's just that the state has a monopoly on gambling through the lottery. But one step you might see take place is potentially online gambling with sports betting and things like that. I think that there's been more support for that. And it's interesting because the major sports organizations in Georgia have been against casinos, but they tend to support sports gambling online.
We'll move on to our next question. Mr. Clark, you'll get first crack at this one with 1 minute to respond.
Mr. Clark, is now the time to expand Medicaid funding considering the economic impact of the COVID-19 crisis? Please explain your answer.
Well, last session, in Governor Kemp's first term, in the beginning of his first term, we did pass 2 Medicaid waivers that they worked on and customized specifically for Georgia to make sure that people up to 100% of the poverty line are covered with healthcare access. And we have actually, this session, I co-sponsored a piece of legislation that passed the House. It's in the Senate now, that would give mothers of newborn children 4 more months of coverage while they recover from the pregnancy, and those that critical period after the child's birth, up to 6 months, from 2 months to 6 months of coverage, to make sure that they get the care that they need to address some of the issues that we've had here in this state. And I was one of the co-sponsors on that. Look forward to working to get that through in June whenever we go back into session.
All right, the Medicaid funding question to Ms. Britt with 1 minute for your response.
I definitely think that we should, but we also have a bigger issue when it comes to not only Medicaid, but food stamps, WIC. Especially here in Houston County, you have people that have put in applications or renewal applications, and they're waiting anywhere from 3, 6, 8 months just to get those benefits or even hear back from somebody. We have a major issue when it comes to getting those applications, getting them processed, and getting people the help that they need. A mother like myself should not have to take off work multiple times to go sit in an office for hours and not receive any help. And if you haven't been to a Medicaid office or a food stamp office and just sit there and watch what happens in these offices, I implore you to do that, because it's saddening that people can't get the assistance that they need.
All right, we have time for one more question, and Ms. Britt, you will get the first crack at this one with 1 minute for your response, please.
How has COVID-19 changed your perspective on Georgia's infrastructure priorities?
I think with the COVID situation, it has opened a lot of our eyes to different aspects, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's healthcare. This is something that has never happened, at least in my lifetime or probably your lifetime. So it has opened our eyes to a lot of different issues that we have, not only in Georgia, but in the United States as a whole. I do think that we need to invest more in all of these different areas and pay more attention to what's going on, not only around us, but within ourselves. And definitely bringing business to the state of Georgia is going to help us move forward from this COVID-19 situation. And I think it's really opened our eyes in a lot of different areas.
All right, Mr. Clark, you now have 1 minute to respond here for our final question.
1 minute, that's going to be tough. So our infrastructure in Georgia is pretty good, but I think one thing that became glaring, and we've started to try, when it's government, you might pass some policies this year, and it's not like you can just snap your fingers and all of a sudden it's fixed overnight. But the technology infrastructure in this state, with COVID-19, I think that brings up we need to start really looking at not just getting the access to rural Georgia, but also getting better quality, because that brings in jobs, the high-tech jobs that come in. That brings in so much other benefit to our state. But when the students got sent back home from universities and colleges in Georgia, and some of them struggle to have internet access at their house. So it's an educational issue, it's a healthcare issue, it's a business and economic development issue, and we need to start really addressing it at the state level. And we have started, but we need to continue to drive that point home to the technology infrastructure in this state.
All right, we've now come to the closing statement portion of this forum tonight. And we'll begin, Mr. Clark, we'll go in reverse order of opening statements. So Mr. Clark, you will go first with closing statements, and you have 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. I just want to thank everybody in Houston County for showing me support over the years and sending me to Atlanta to represent you and be your voice and your mouth in Atlanta and try. And I've worked hard to do that. I've worked hard to be reachable and responding to emails and phone calls and questions. And I'll continue to do that. I'll continue to be accessible and transparent. I try to post as many of my votes as possible on my Facebook page. And I'll continue to do that for you. I'll fight for you. I'll fight for Robins Air Force Base and the other military installations to get the pensions for those to be the tax cut to those that they're not taxed. Military spouses, when they come into this state and they have no choice in where they live, that they can get to work, that we can utilize our private sector in Houston County to grow and strengthen its technology private sector around Houston County that will also strengthen Robins Air Force Base.
And Ms. Britt, you'll finish this up with your 1-minute closing statement.
I just want to let everyone know that definitely transparency and communication within our community is very big and important to me. I will not only be your voice in Atlanta, but also the person that will listen to your issues and take them to heart. I am open to meetings, phone calls. If you want to give me a call, I definitely will get in contact with you. If you want to have a meeting with me, I am open to be your listening ear and make changes in the state. We have some major issues that are going on, not only in the state, but specifically here in Houston County. And whether it's something or getting you to someone that can address your issues, that's what I'm here for. So right now is early voting. So make sure you go out and vote. And then the actual voting day is June 9th. And I hope to earn your vote. Thank you very much.
And thank you both. Miranda Britt, Heath Clark, thanks very much for being with us. April and I'll be back in just a couple of minutes. We'll present to you State Senate District number 20, Larry Walker III, and Franklin Wetmore. Thank you for watching tonight's Houston County Political Forum, sponsored by Robins Regional Chamber.
Y'all stick around.
welcome to our virtual candidate forum, our continuing candidate forum as we count down to Election Day, which is June 9th. I'm Frank Malloy with 13 WMAZ, along with April Braggs. She's President and CEO of Robins Regional Chamber, tonight's sponsoring organization. And we're pleased to welcome now into our virtual studio our candidates for Senate Seat 20, and that includes the incumbent, Larry Walker III, and the challenger, Franklin Wetmore. Mr. Walker, Mr. Wetmore, thanks very much for being with us. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules. Format is simple. You'll each have 2 minutes for opening statements. Then April will ask a series of questions. You both will get a chance to respond to those, and then we'll finish with 1 minute closing statements. So if you're ready to go, we'll start in alphabetical order as far as opening statements go. And that means, Mr. Walker, you will go first with 2 minutes.
Hey, April. Hey, Frank. And hey, everybody in Facebook land. Really appreciate the Robins Regional Chamber and WMAZ for hosting this unique forum so that I can communicate with my constituents and talk about the issues of the day and their concerns. So look forward to visiting with everybody during this 30 minutes. I was born and raised in Perry, and except for the 4 years in Athens at the University of Georgia and a couple of years working for the Coca-Cola Company in Atlanta, I've lived in Middle Georgia. I married my high school sweetheart, Adrian, while we were still in college. She's been a tremendous teammate for me, and I wouldn't have had any of the successes I've had without her help and steadfast support. In Atlanta, we had our first child, and as we were starting to raise our family, we realized we wanted to get back to Middle Georgia, so we moved to Dublin. Had a great 5 years in that fantastic community. And later I was able to move back home to Perry, where I started Walker Insurance Agency that I still operate today with my partner, Brent Scooty. I've been involved in the community in various organizations over the years, very involved in Perry United Methodist Church, involved with the House and County Development Authority, the Perry Rotary Club, et And I realized in some of the leadership roles I had there that I thought I had a skill set to lead people and to bring people together and through collaboration and consensus to get positive things done for our community. And when Senator Tollison announced his resignation from the Senate seat, I felt like the Lord had prepared me to run for that office. And thankfully, the citizens of Senate District 20 elected me without a runoff in a six-person race. So I'm very honored to represent the Senate District 20. It's been a pleasure, and my driving desire is to make Middle Georgia a place where our children want to come back to, have an opportunity to come back to, and raise their family.
All right, Mr. Walker, thanks very much. Mr. Wetmore, welcome. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
You guys it's a little choppy. Can you guys hear me? Well, I'm presuming you guys can hear me on your side. My name's Franklin Wetmore. I'm from Vero Beach, Florida. I lived in Florida until a couple of years ago. Came to Georgia, even though I was in the Georgia Air National Guard for 7 years. I've grown to love Georgia. Enjoy everything about this area of Georgia, the people that I'm involved with militarily and also civilian-wise. Georgia has become my second home. Sometimes I feel at home, but I feel at home at the same time. It's a very loving place. As for my skill set that I bring to the table, I ran companies in South Florida, as well as I'm in the 202nd Engineering Installation Squadron on the base at Robins Air Force Base. Had the ability to lead people and also help people along the way. I've been deployed multiple times to serve my country. Me running for the Senate is me just wanting to serve in a different way and serve the community. I have nothing at all bad to say about Mr. Larry Walker. I believe he's done a lot of amazing things for the community. And I wish him the best of luck in his campaign, and I'm going to do the best that I can do in my campaign. And we're two patriots trying to serve our country. And I believe either myself or himself, we will get it done. And that's what I have for leadership abilities. I'm here to make change. A lot of the things that I believe in, things that I want to do are a lot, they're drastic, but sometimes I feel drastic things have to be done to make change. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you. Appreciate everybody.
So you're joining us by your phone, and we do appreciate you taking time to be with us. All right, we'll now go to the question and answer session. April, you will be asking the questions. First question, Mr. Wetmore, you have first crack at it, and you have 1 minute to respond.
Mr. Wetmore, what do you think is the greatest challenge our state will face in the next couple of years, and how do you plan to address that challenge?
I can't. Sorry. Not sure who this question is for. I'm gonna have to log back in because everything's too choppy. The screen's blank. So let me get back to you.
All right, here we are. As we continue to move along, and that's some of the challenges that we face when it comes to the virtual forum sometimes, but we are pleased to be able to bring this to you. As we said, early voting started today, which is the Monday, May 18th. For those of you who are joining us live, it runs through June the 5th, and then Election Day is June the 9th. Of course, something to keep in mind is the legislature right now in recess, but the session is still not finished yet. That's correct, Mr. Walker? The session still has a ways to go.
Yeah, we suspended session on March 13th due to the coronavirus. We had to go back up there the following Monday, March 16th, for a special session, but we've been suspended since then, and we'll return to Atlanta in mid-June sometime. We haven't passed the budget yet, so we got to pass the budget before the end of June.
All right, Mr. Wetmore, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can actually hear you and see you now, so I apologize for any inconvenience for everybody.
No worries. All right, we'll go to that question. April, do you want to go ahead and repeat the question?
Sure. Yes. Mr. Wetmore, what do you think is the greatest challenge our
I can see
state
the
will
question
face
on the
in the
screen
next
about
couple of years?
the state will face in the next couple of years. That's the
Yeah.
question you're referring
Yes,
to?
that is correct. You have 1 minute to answer.
Okay. So my thing that I see in the next couple of years, specifically in the Houston County area, is the infrastructure of the roadways. I've seen it in South Florida where we went from small towns. The next thing you know, you're into hundreds of thousands of extra people living in the area. As you know, in the past 7 years of coming up here, I'm noticing more and more people that are on the road, but the roads have not kept up. Meaning some roads that are 2-lane roads should already be 4-lane roads, and some of the 3-lane medians, those should already be 3 lanes on each side. I see within the next year to 2 years there being a huge traffic infrastructure problem here in Houston County. That's one main thing that's on my agenda that I'd like to actually work on, trying to have funding to actually grow this area infrastructure-wise, because I promise you there's going to be some issues within the next couple of years here. Thank you.
Mr. Walker, greatest challenge the state will face. 1 minute for your answer, please.
With the pandemic we're in, the budget is taking a huge hit, and so the budget is going to be the biggest challenge we immediately face. We had a red hot economy, lowest unemployment in recorded history in Georgia, about 3% unemployment. Now we're looking at about 20% is the latest figure I saw. The budget's going to take a big hit. That's going to be a challenge. We got to navigate that. We need somebody with experience and relationships, and somebody that's at the table like I am, to be sure that Middle Georgia does not have to bear an unfair portion of the burden in the budget cuts. After that, I think getting the people back to work, getting the economy back going is going to be job number one. And I intend to go up there and work tirelessly to do that.
All right, question number 2. First response this time will go to Mr. Walker, and you'll have 1 minute to answer the question from April.
Mr. Walker, what in your view is the greatest economic development opportunity for our state right now?
Well, where we are with Robins Air Force Base, that's obviously the economic driver here, the economic engine. And I think there's great opportunity to bring more missions to Robins and all the surrounding support businesses that go along with that. One of the bills I passed, I'm really proud of, is to establish Houston County as a military economic opportunity zone. And this gives us payroll tax credits that we can offer new industry to come here that are in support of the base. So that's going to be helpful as we try to get the economy back going and grow industry. Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan also wants to have Georgia be the Silicon Valley of the South. And I'm really excited about some of the initiatives surrounding the technology, using technology and our workforce development in that area and training our students on software development and software engineering. So I think there's a great opportunity there too.
Economic development question, Mr. Wetmore, you have 1 minute to answer.
Okay, I presume that's my turn. It's getting kind of choppy again here. Some of the things that I think would be great for economic opportunity would be the school systems and also reforming the prison systems itself. Not only taking people that are in the prison systems and reforming them, actually teaching them some viable skills that they can actually use on the outside so they could be tax-paying contributors to society. Furthermore, in the school system is where education all begins before it leads down the path of incarceration in prison school systems. I think that better schools in general, I know Houston County area has decent schools here, but I think there should be more emphasis and money pumped into the schools so people learn more while they're there and learn more about etiquette and how to go about and navigate society. I know a lot of times it's about learning history and learning science and this stuff, but actually, how to navigate society as itself, proper etiquette. And I think that should be pushed into the school systems to keep people from going down the path of incarceration, prison systems, and inadvertently it contributes to the tax dollar. Thank you.
All right, we have a new question now. Mr. Wetmore, you will respond first to this one. April?
Mr. Wetmore, Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan took a 14% voluntary pay cut. What do you think about this gesture, and is it something you think the state senators in his chamber should also volunteer to do?
I'm not hearing the name being called out for whose turn it is, and I see Mr. Larry Walker's not speaking. I don't want to interrupt him, but I see nobody speaking right now. I actually think it's a great gesture to take a voluntary pay cut. I think that's a great thing, and that's not a people do that. I think that's something that every individual inside of them should consider doing. It depends on their family situation. It depends on life in general, whatever hurdles come their way. But I do think that's a very special thing. That's a very beautiful thing when somebody can actually do that. And I appreciate that individual for doing that. It's amazing. Thank you.
All right. Senator Walker, your response to the question, please.
I do respect the Lieutenant Governor for doing that. His salary is around $90,000 a year. He works tirelessly. He ought to be paid twice that. But I do appreciate the symbolic gesture he's making there. I don't know. Do you guys know what we make as state senators? I bet the Facebook audience does not know. It's about $17,000. It's supposed to be a part-time job, but I spend about 60% of my time on it, at least during the session, 110% of my time. So if I were to take a 14% pay cut, I wouldn't hardly notice it, and certainly the taxpayers wouldn't notice it on such a small salary.
All right, we'll now move on to our next question. And Mr. Walker, you'll respond first this time.
Mr. Walker, Georgia has made great strides in passing military-friendly legislation in recent sessions. If reelected, in your case, or elected, Mr. Wetmore, what is the most important military issue you believe should be addressed through legislation?
Well, we've worked really hard on military bills. I think I counted the other day, we passed over 25 military and veteran-friendly bills since I've been in session. Since I've been in office since 2015. There's still work to be done. We need to continue to improve our licensing process for spouses that move into the state with the military spouse, make it easier for them to get a job and go to work without having to take a course or sit for exams when they're already trained to do that. The Joint Defense Commission, which I sit on, needs to do a better job, I think, of working with all 9 of our military installations to see where we have opportunities to collaborate and get more missions in Georgia. So I look forward to working on that.
All right, Mr. Wetmore, it is your turn now to respond, and you have 1 minute, please.
My main things that I'd like to see improved would be overhauling of portions of the actual VA systems. Being military and actually having, been in combat situation and being wounded in combat and having the transitionary type of period with healthcare and all the problems and being on orders and then coming, having to come off orders, and a lot of the paperwork, dealing with the military of having to, request, MedCon and all those type of things. It shouldn't be something that I should really have had my hand into while I was trying to heal, coming home from overseas, as well as the VA system itself. Many times I filled out paperwork and turned it in just to go back and turn it in a 4th time. To piggyback on that, also, when they send things in the mail, it has all your Privacy Act of 1974 stuff on there. It has your name, has your social security number. That's something that I'd like to see changed when they're doing mail, or when they're sending you correspondence in the mail, to get rid of those things, so you don't damage your credit and that's pretty much what I got to say about that. Thank you.
All right, we are. Next question, and Mr. Wetmore, you will respond first this time, please. 1 minute once April asks you the question.
Mr. Wetmore, in regard to the proposed right to farm bill, do you believe the current state of the law needs to be revised? Why or why not?
I don't see Mr. Larry Walker talking, so I'm going to go ahead and speak on that. I'm going to have to actually forego that question. I'm not going to sit here and chase my tail and act like I know what I'm talking about. That's something I have to see in front of me to actually look it over, study it, and get back to you on that. I know farming is an extremely important thing, but like I said, I'm not going to sit here and talk about this subject when I have not done enough research into it. Thank you.
You ready for me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I serve on the Senate Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee, and that's where the bill came to out of the House. I worked hours and hours on this bill, got all the interested parties together, from Georgia Farm Bureau to the River Keepers to the Georgia Forestry Association, Georgia Agribusiness Council, et cetera. We took the House bill. It needed a lot of work. I created a committee substitute that we have passed out of the Ag Committee. It's now in rules. I do think we need to pass it. Agriculture is our #1 industry in Georgia. And I think if anything we learned through this pandemic is that our food supply is critical, and having a safe local food supply is very important. And I think that's become more and more evident. So I hope we will be able to pass the right to farm bill.
All right, new question now. Mr. Walker, you will go first this time with 1 minute to respond.
Mr. Walker, how has COVID-19 changed your perspective on Georgia's infrastructure priorities?
Well, as evidenced by this forum tonight and the fact that we're having to do Zoom meetings, I'd never even heard of Zoom. I didn't know what that was. I thought it was an exercise class, but I've been in a lot of Zoom meetings. I think our broadband infrastructure needs a lot of work. We have been working on that. We did pass legislation to allow the electric membership corporations to get in the broadband business. We did that 2 years ago. We're starting to see some results from that. It's still a lot of work to be done. Of course, it all takes a ton of money. So we're going to continue to work on that. Also, the disparity between access to health care is alarming. Rural Georgians do not have the same access to health care as people in Metro Atlanta. And I think when you have this kind of health crisis, it really shows up. And the crisis they've had in the Albany area with so many cases and deaths just shows us that we got to continue to work on our healthcare infrastructure.
All right, the infrastructure question, Mr. Wetmore, you now have 1 minute to answer, please.
I'm in agreement as healthcare is a severe and important priority. A lot of hospitals here that I've actually been through or nearby, it seemed like if something were to major hit the area, it's not ready for it. The healthcare seems a little bit behind its times in this area, and I've seen that from being hurt and dealing with stuff in local facilities. Second thing for like infrastructure, I've noticed that the internet in this area, it's as of tonight, I'm seeing the questions on the screen. That's pretty much what I'm getting. That's just how it is tonight. But as for the communications in the area, in certain areas, they can be better. One thing that has always boggled my mind about Georgia is why most of their power and everything's running above ground when it's such a history of tornadoes and things in the area. I know it's a separate issue, but I do believe the infrastructure could be better, and also hopefully more companies will come in and actually have service for that. There's a lack of companies and competition in the area that I've noticed. Thank you.
All right, move on to our next question now. Mr. Wetmore, you will go first this time. You will have a minute to respond.
Mr. Wetmore, can you hear me? Yeah, Mr. Wetmore, this one's for you. Rural areas across the state face healthcare challenges due to limited access to hospitals. What are some ways we can enhance healthcare options for those living in our rural areas?
Presuming that's for me to answer that. I believe there should be some kind of government stipends to actually move. You have big hospitals in Georgia, and in the rural areas, obviously it's a lot smaller. It'd be neat to have some sort of government subsidied money that could be affixed to hospitals to give them little med clinics or med stops along the way. I think that's one thing that could actually help with this situation. It'll help in general in those areas. I know sometimes that's one thing that I've always feared. Like if I lived out in the middle of nowhere and I had a heart attack, how long would it actually take me to get to a hospital? That's partly why I like to be in the middle of the city. So I do believe that if there was some kind of government subsidies to assist with the hospitals, or at least some kind of investment from the state in having smaller facilities along the way, it wouldn't actually overburden hospitals if everybody had to actually rush to the main hospital at the same time. Things could be handled on a local basis. Thank you.
Mr. Walker, you have 1 minute to answer the question on rural health care.
One thing we've done to help rural hospitals is we passed a tax credit program to incentivize private donations to rural hospitals. We call it the Georgia Heart Program. Folks can donate to a rural hospital and get a dollar for dollar state tax credit. That's put over $125 million in rural hospitals. We also have passed Governor Kemp's application or request for an 1115 Medicaid waiver. That should help rural hospitals once that's approved and in place. We've also increased the reimbursement for Medicaid for OBGYNs to try to keep OBGYNs in rural hospitals. And we've partnered with Mercer to try to get physicians to locate in rural areas and give them a scholarship grant if they will do that.
All right, we'll have one more question from April. Mr. Walker, you will respond first this time with 1 minute.
Mr. Walker, with the economic slowdown, how do you plan to keep taxes low while rebuilding the emergency fund and keeping a balanced budget?
That's a good question. It's going to be difficult. We did pass, for the first time ever, a cut in our income tax 2 years ago, the top rate, and we doubled the standard deduction for individuals and families. I'm real proud of that. I'm committed not to raising taxes through this. We're going to just have to make some real tough decisions and use technology where we can to become more efficient in state government. But it's going to be a painful process. Thankfully, we do have the rainy day fund, about $2.7 billion. I'm afraid that's going to be depleted through this, but that's what it's for. But we're going to have some hard choices to make.
All right, Mr. Wetmore, this time you have a chance to answer. 1 minute for the question, please, about the economic slowdown.
Okay. My thing that I think it would actually. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Was he still talking?
I can.
Okay. So my thing that I'd like to see happen. Okay. Is it my turn?
Yes.
I think it's my turn. Okay. So one thing that I'd like to see is the tax situation. When a government has money, say they were allocated $10 million for a budget, and say they only spend half of that. If they were to send half of their money back in, typically an agency usually is penalized for doing so. For the most part, their budget will be smaller the next year typically. What I'd like to see is if an agency has surplus money, to shave that money off on an honor policy instead of just trying to spend it to spend it. Put that back into the actual governmental system to be reallocated with no punishment attached in a way, even though it's not a punishment, so they don't have less money being allocated for them the following year. That's the biggest problem with our government, is the fact that they keep spending money. When somebody's honorable and hands that stuff back, they get a smaller budget the following year. That's one thing that myself would like to see change, and most people in America would like to see change, including in Georgia. Thank you.
All right, we're now going to finish with closing statements. 1 minute. Mr. Wetmore, you'll go first. We go in reverse order of opening statements. So, Mr. Wetmore, close. 1 minute, please.
I'm not hearing anybody's voices. Just want to let you guys know I'm trying to read lips here.
Your closing statement is what they're asking for.
Okay, I saw his lips move, so I presume that we're about done here. So my closing statement that I have is, I'm not from Georgia. I'm from somewhere else. I appreciate everything that Mr. Larry Walker has done. I think you've done great in this community. I have nothing bad to say about you at all. Some of the things that I'd like to see that I have come for the community here to change up in Atlanta would be bettering of the foster care program, bettering of the VA system, crafting laws that fight discrimination and as well as reverse discrimination, teacher protections against assault and battery, right to bear arms, 2 term limits for Congress, heavier penalties for assault and battery of more than 2 persons. That's no longer just assault or some high school that says that, oh, somebody had a fight on a school bus. That's actually attempted murder to me. There should be heavier punishments for that. Child protections for crimes against children, including rapes. What I would like to see is somebody who hurts a child, that they get put in prison for the rest of their life and not allowed out. They have altered that individual's soul, that child's soul. That is what main things that I'm going to run for, things that I want to get done. I appreciate everything Mr. Larry Walker has done. I have an agenda that I want to do, and there's some things that he has mentioned that I want to touch on as well. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll close it out. Senator Walker, you will finish this up with a 1 minute closing statement.
I want to thank Mr. Wetmore and the kind words he said. I look forward to meeting him. I've never met him. Look forward to meeting him and working with him. He's got some good ideas we need to look at. I am in a position, I've been up there almost 4.5 years, so I'm in my 5th session. It takes a little while to learn the system up there. It takes a while to build relationships, get seniority, and have some influence. I'm in leadership in the Senate. I was elected by my colleagues as vice chairman of the caucus. I serve on the Powerful Rules Committee, Appropriations Committee, Health and Human Services, Agriculture, Insurance and Labor, Veterans and Military Affairs. I'm in a position where I can help Middle Georgia. We're in some mighty trying times. I'm honored to serve. I'm honored to represent Middle Georgia. I'm in a position to be effective, and I hope the citizens of Senate District 20 will see fit to send me back. I'm always available. I would ask them to contact me if they have any questions or want to get into further detail on these issues. And I ask for their vote.
Larry Walker, Franklin Wetmore, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We certainly appreciate it. Again, thank you for being with us tonight as we count down to Election Day on June 9th. We certainly appreciate the Robins Regional Chamber folks. And April, we'll let you have our final words tonight.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you to all of the candidates, as well as all of you watching from home. The replay will be available on 13wmaz.com, as well as our Facebook page and YouTube. You can find them both on our website, robinsregion.com. Y'all have a great night, everybody.
Take care. Thank you.